Welcome to Lesson 5, where we are going to talk about the settings in the camera's menu in order to work with JPG format as well as optimize the image processing. Here it's important to clarify that it's not the same working in JPG that in RAW. JPG images are directly processed by the camera, while RAW files aren't processed nor compressed. So we'll have to open it later on with a specific software in the computer in order for this image to be processed and also to enhance it. Okay, so this is the basic difference between them. Let's say we choose working with JPG and we want to reduce the processing time or adjust the image based on what I want to represent. In this case, we'll find in the camera's menu lots of possibilities to adjust and enhance the result. For example, the picture style, which is a feature in the menu, lets us vary the contrast, saturation, sharpness. We can even select a black and white mode, producing monochrome images, using color filters, and so on. What is saturation and contrast? Saturation refers to the color intensity, so I can determine the intensity of the hue it is if I want colors more or less intense, and the same for the contrast, which is the difference between lights and shadows of the scene. We can emphasize this contrast or reduce it depending on our personal taste. For this reason, cameras offer different picture styles. Turn on your camera and look for it in the menu. This feature is also called picture style, photo style, wherever. So in your menu you have to look for something like this, where you can play around with the contrast, saturation, black and white, and so on. Anyway, all this refers to JPG images. What else can we find in the menu? There is an option to correct the aberration produced by the lens when working in an angle position. Try this out. We won't go into much detail since we talked about it in the previous course, although it's true that we can face some aberration issues with certain focal lengths. So in this case, we can make use of this option to minimize the aberration, okay? Another feature we can find in the menu is the Auto Lighting Optimizer. In this camera, it's called Auto Lighting Optimizer, okay? Although it may be called differently in other cameras. Just look for something related to scene lighting. The auto lighting in this camera offers 4 different custom functions: off, low, standard, and high. This option is great for correcting the brightness and contrast of the scene. It usually adds brightness and enhances the result so that the image comes out homogeneous and more detail can be appreciated. What else? Well, we can also find noise reduction settings, which reduce the noise generated by the ISO or by long exposure. It's important to differentiate it. We need to understand that the noise generated in the image can be as a consequence of a long exposure, it is, the shutter is open during a long time, so the camera lets us enable or disable it. On the other hand, this noise can be generated by a high ISO speed, so we can use this option to reduce the noise. So, if we enter the menu and look for this option, we'll find different custom functions. So, off, off, low, standard, high, to reduce the noise when working with a high ISO. Is this useful? Yes. The only problem with the noise reduction is that it also affects the sharpness of the image. So, it is you who have to decide if you want to use it or not. I would recommend that you take 2 pictures, one with a high ISO and another with a low one, or even one standard. He has to see the noise generated in each of them and, after that, try the different noise reduction options. Guys, each camera is different, bear in mind this, so you need to play around and try it in order to see how it works. Do the same with your camera, take the same picture with different ISO sensitivities and then with different noise reduction options. Do the same with the lightness and picture style. Let's put all this into practice so that you can see that it's possible to change the image's appearance and get the expected results. So we are going to play around with the different menu settings to achieve photos that meet our needs, okay? In this first exercise, we're going to work with the picture styles. If you have a look at it, you'll see that there are different styles. We can find auto, standard, portrait, landscape, neutral, faithful, or monochrome. Let's select the standard. If you look closely, you'll be indicated on the screen where the options are to adjust the style, which are the detail settings. So if we select this option, a new window appears with different options: sharpness, contrast, saturation, and color tone. What does each of them mean? Well, I think here the most important ones are contrast and saturation. Sharpness refers to how much detail is shown in an image. We can reflect detail when shooting the trunk of a tree or a landscape, but if we are shooting a portrait, sharpness is not necessary. In fact, each picture style adjusts those parameters depending on what you are shooting. That's why we have here a portrait mode with a lower sharpness or a landscape mode with more sharpness. So again, these picture styles modify all these parameters. So we won't be paying attention to sharpness. Instead, although I would adjust contrast and saturation, the contrast is the difference between light and dark in an image. So we're going to use this to have a different range of highlights and shadows. On the contrary, saturation is related to the intensity of color, and we're going to use this to modify the tone of the scene and take warmer or colder pictures. Well, first I'm going to take a picture with a standard picture style without modifying it. I've chosen this scene because there's plenty of color and because I'll use it to talk later about color variation when using the monochrome mode. Okay, let's take the picture. Perfect. And then observe the result. I can see that the result is acceptable and the colors are fine. Don't forget to adjust the parameters ISO, shutter speed and aperture as always. And then in the menu, I'm going to increase the contrast and saturation a little bit. And then repeat the image. Okay, what happens? If you look closely, you'll see there's a color variation. Whether we like it or not will depend on our personal taste, on if we are having a good day or not, or on what we are looking for. So I recommend that you play around and explore the different options and features in your menu. Now let's move on to the black and white picture style, the monochrome style. This style produces images containing tones of neutral gray, ranging from black to white, so the contrast of color disappears. As we are working with a gray scale, colorfulness will disappear, okay? Let's try it with a photo. The photo is okay, but I prefer the version in color. In addition, you also need to bear in mind when taking monochrome pictures that some colors have the same brightness. This means that there are colors like green and red, which become the same gray tone. Others like yellow and purple, which can be easily differentiated because they are lighter or darker. But it can be sometimes difficult to differentiate some colors. Therefore, select the monochrome option and then press Info Detail Settings and have a look at the features offered by each manufacturer. For example, here I see sharpness again, contrast, which is something fundamental when taking black and white pictures, at least for me. So let's increase contrast by 2 points and shoot again to see what happens. That's it. If we compare this new shot with the previous one, the dark tones are emphasized and the contrast black and white stands out. For monochrome, you can also set the filter effect, which you'll find in the menu as well. Inside the filter effect, it can be red, neon, yellow, orange, red and green. Let's try with green and red. So guys, what's filter effect? Something similar to this was used years ago in analog photography. Well, filter effects lighten the color we've selected and darken its complementary. For example, if we select red, this red will be lightened and the green darkened. And the other way around. If we select green, the camera lightens it and darkens the red. And you may ask, what is this for? Well, when taking a picture of a red rose on a green background, as they have the same gray tone, we want to differentiate them. Let's take 2 pictures of this scene because there are different colors. I'm going to take the first one with the red. The red tones should be lighter and the green ones darker. And now, let's try green. And you'll see how the result changes. It affected the colors, okay? Which one do I prefer? I'll take the second one since the background is lighter and the pictotoy is slightly darker. What else can we adjust with this black and white style? There is another option called toning effect, which comes with some cameras. In Nikon, for example, this feature can be adjusted gradually. By applying a toning effect, you can create a monochrome image in the color. Here we can see sepia, blue, purple and green, although I believe they are a bit like fantasy. Let's give the sepia a try, which is a classic. By applying this, we will get a brown tone, right? This effect is great, for instance, when taking a portrait shot and you want to take it directly in black and white. But remember that the lighting of the scene must be appropriate for this. If you don't want to use black and white anymore, just go to the picture style. You can keep the monochrome settings or readjust them and then choose any other style, standard, portrait, landscape, wherever. Let's select the standard, which I previously adjusted. From now on, you can play around with the different picture styles to produce a final result according to your needs and personal taste. Let's do now an exercise to explore the auto lighting optimizer. We're going to shoot twice, one with the lighting off and other with a high lighting. This camera offers 4 custom features: off, low, standard and high. The difference between each of them is sometimes almost imperceptible. That's why I recommend you use the highest and lowest options to see the difference. In my case, I don't use the auto lighting very often since I prefer the scene contrast. And I usually work with RAW, I adjust it later. But this feature is useful and interesting for those using JPG and want to achieve a good result directly from the camera. Let's practice with it a little bit. I'm going to take 2 pictures of some objects, one with a highlighting and other with a low, for you to see the difference between them. First with the lighting off and the second one with a highlighting. Make sure that the 3 parameters, ISO, shutter speed and aperture, are well adjusted. Although in this case I recommend using the manual mode, because this way the parameters won't change and you only need to focus on changing the lighting and thus notice the differences between each shot. So guys, as I said, manual mode is really useful in this case because ISO, shutter speed and aperture won't change. So you only need to focus on each shot, okay, and how lighting works. Well, to finish with, we are going to practice the noise reduction option in your cameras. As we said before, it can be long exposure generated, which we want to practice now, since we want to be working with long exposure times. And plus, when using this long exposure noise reduction, the time taken by the camera to shoot is duplicated. It is, the camera spends another, let's say, 10 seconds to take another picture without opening the shutter, in order to detect the noise generated by the camera and then compare with the original to delete the noise. For this reason, long exposure noise reduction slows down the process. As I said, we want to talk about it in this course. So, let's talk about the noise generated by the high ISO noise reduction. Guys, again, I recommend that you try this by yourselves. Just select a scene similar to this with plenty of color and objects, some of them dark and others colorful, so that you can check how the noise appears when increasing the ISO sensitivity. Take the same picture with every ISO sensitivity, and after that, if your camera offers diverse noise reduction options, try with each of them. As there are many of them, off, low, standard, and high, you can try with the opposites. It is the off and high, for example, which is what I'm going to do. Okay, so I'm going to take one with off and another one high. So guys, we need to work with a high ISO sensitivity. I'm going to set it at 6400, okay? In your case, it would depend on what your camera allows you. So from now on, you're ready to start adjusting your menu settings, such as the contrast, saturation, black and white, lighting optimizer, noise reduction, and so on. So you can see, our cameras offer us tons of possibilities to adjust the photo's parameters directly when working, instead of using a software afterward. This is great for saving a lot of time.